Community.
Association.
Social justice.
Association.
Unique.
Civic duty.
As far as what we are called to do, I believe, I mean, you can look to the founder. He would talk about finding those who are the least, the last, the lost, providing, and again, the times were very different, but I think the call, you can find commonality in the call. I mean, he would talk about how you would educate people, and the education would be the path to salvation. And we no longer use that kind of language when talking about education. But I think that we are called to educate.
LaSalle University staff members, be they involved in student affairs, campus ministry, admissions, or academic support, are crucial to the embodiment of our Lasallian Charism. Educators in their own right, LaSalle University staff members live the reality of our tradition by forming unbreakable connections with students outside of the classroom and molding them into productive, attentive, and responsive members of society. This is their story.
One of the strong views in the Lasallian tradition is that we are all educators. So you remember Tractor Mary, who kept our grounds looking terrific. She was a Lasallian educator, just like Brother Jerry Fitzgerald in accounting is a Lasallian educator, and I'm a Lasallian educator, and whoever's working in Starbucks is a Lasallian educator. So it is this notion that our students are with us to learn from all of us.
When I take a look at an incoming freshman class and see the honors student, you have God's gifts of intelligence, which you had really nothing to do with but to nurture it. And I see those students thrive here. And I also see the student who doesn't even know yet what their gifts are, and they thrive here. It's that student who I think would not survive in the other traditions, because the other traditions would say, you're not ready for this. And it's okay, we're not judging, but you're not ready for this. And I think at LaSalle, people just go, come on, you can do this. And I think that's a distinction.
And I had the real benefit the summer of 2019 to complete the Lasallian Leadership Institute in Rome. So this is something that runs for 2 weeks every June. And senior administrators and faculty from Lasallian universities around the world are invited to come and participate really in a deep discovery around Lasallian mission. And I think one of the critical points that I took away from that about our heritage and our charism is really around association, the notion that the brothers have worked very closely with lay members, although brothers are technically lay, but the brothers have worked with Lasallian partners since the beginning. That this is not something that you see in many religious congregations now, where it's sort of like, well, we're running out of priests or brothers or sisters, so we better start getting lay people involved. This has been the approach of St. John Baptist to LaSalle since the very beginning. So for me, that is a deeply meaningful concept. I'm a graduate of a Lasallian high school in Toronto, Canada, and saw that in action there, and have seen it dramatically in action on our campus in the 5+ years that I've been president.
I look out my window. My window overlooks the quad. I see it every single hour, minute of the day. And whether it's Brother Jerry Molyneux stopping to talk to a student, right? It could be Dr. S on her way to a meeting over in College Hall, stopping to talk to a student who has a question or wants to. It could be you stopping to talk to an underclassman. It doesn't. The beauty of those Lasallian moments is that there's no spotlight and dramatic soundtrack in the background. It just happens. Even with prospective student visitors, I love it, right? You know this. A prospective student family walks on the campus, they kind of look around and they're lost. It doesn't matter who you are. I guarantee you a LaSalle student or faculty member is going to stop and ask you if you need help and mean it and not just blow right past you.
There is a statue of St. John Baptiste de La Salle. I believe it's in St. Peter's in the Vatican, of him kind of pointing to a book to a child on one side, and then there being a younger child on the other side of the founder, and the older child pointing to the book of the younger child. And that image has always stuck with me when we talk about how Lasallians do things, we talk about sibling-like relationships, and so the brothers are, and actually all the faculty and staff, I would think, there's a relationship of siblings, not parental structure, but of siblings. And so the fact that, the oldest is helping the middle is helping the youngest, and kind of how that flows.
There's a very different hierarchy. So brothers, it's not just a coincidence that they're not priests. They've chosen not to be priests, because in the Lasallian tradition, brothers on our campuses or in our high schools, depending on where you are like older siblings. They're like older siblings to our students. And that doesn't sound like much. You think, well, what's the difference? Well, they're teaching you as they stand beside you, instead of teaching you as they stand here over you, telling you how it's going to be. So what does that mean on the ground at a Lasallian institution, be it a college or a high school? It means that the teaching that takes place is much more almost collegial. It is a process of iterative learning back and forth between the teacher and the student. It is this idea of a guide from the side instead of the sage on the stage that is telling you what you need to learn, where you just open your mouth like a baby bird and we spoon it in. That is not the Lasallian model. The Lasallian model is one almost of negotiating knowledge. So it's like back and forth, and you're standing there with your sibling, and your sibling is showing you different ways to look at things, and you are responding and they respond to that. It's a very, I know that sounds sort of strange to describe it, but it's a very different model, not only in theory, but in practice. I saw it in my high school, and I see it not only in our Christian brothers and the way they approach education, but frankly, the way all of us approach education, because we have learned from them through association. So you have this wonderful gift of association where we are literally shoulder to shoulder with the brothers, and then it's shoulder to shoulder doing something that is very different on our campuses than you will see in other campuses.
I think back to when I was a student and the relationships I had with professors and staff, and then returning here as a staff member, as a fully formed adult, watching those relationships evolve. It's no longer teacher and student, it's now mentor and colleague. And I think that that's one place in which I see the tradition in action. I think that the way in which the culture reflects the importance of relationship. It's anybody can get up and lecture. It takes a specific type of educator to commit to developing relationships, to care one-on-one, to really get to know students.
I think there's a lot going on obviously right now on multiple fronts, and I think we need to focus on the fact that we're here to serve individuals, and again, that might look different. So I think we have to be sometimes flexible and creative in what we do, and realize that we might need to adjust as we do that work. So it might look different or might have a different focus at different times. Again, I do think that goal, going back to the beginning of providing opportunity for those who might not otherwise easily have it, is an important focus and goal, and is increasingly, it's more important every day. And I think there's a lot of discussion happening surrounding some of those issues, but I think that's even more important that component of the Lasallian heritage is followed through, and that's not lost today, because the world still needs it just as much, if not more.
Here. So Nick, I believe you've met my mother. She was in the first class of women to attend LaSalle. And she tells a story about being in a class and struggling. And the professor knowing her well enough to know that if he were to go at her with a woe is me type conversation, that she would have folded and she would have quit. But instead he challenged her. And through that challenge, she found strength and resiliency that she would not have found otherwise. And the professor had gotten to know her well enough to know that that was the button to push in that scenario. And that's something that I see as being a distinctly Lasallian piece. It's meeting the individual students where they are, getting to know them, who they are, and then helping to push them to the best possible version of themselves. And that may not be what society is telling them that they need to be. But it helps that individual person, that individual soul grow.
Nobody at LaSalle is trying to force you into a mold. You know, there isn't this hierarchical notion of knowledge where the person at the top has the knowledge and they're just going to force feed it to you. But rather, the notion is that you meet a student where he or she is based on, with respect for the experience that they have amassed in their life to date. So instead of this view that sometimes you hear in other educational circles of, you know, what does an 18 or 19-year-old know? They know nothing. They come in as a blank slate, a lump of clay, and we will, no, the Lasallian approach is very different. That is 18 years or 17 years or 19 years of lived experience. And we are going to value that. We're going to honor that. We're going to work with that. And that student is actually going to change knowledge because of that lived experience. They are going to reflect on the theory that we present to them in a very different way. So part of that is also understanding that students are not all coming from the same place. If you're in an intro criminal justice course and you're hearing about incarceration in the United States, you may well have students, you will have students in that class. If they haven't been incarcerated themselves, they have a parent who's been incarcerated or a sibling or somebody in their close family that they could speak very passionately to that experience. Well, in a Lasallian setting, meeting students where you are partly is respecting that they are bringing to the table a certain knowledge themselves and not discounting that and saying, okay, well, that's interesting because maybe that shifts how the faculty member thinks about incarceration because of something they're learning from a student. It's a remarkable and it's actually a very subversive way of learning. It is a two-way back and forth iterative instead of me just feeding you and you soaking it in and then spewing it back to me on an exam, my thoughts, not your thoughts. The best examples of Lasallian teaching is this back and forth iterative process of developing knowledge between us. We are developing it together. I don't have it, you don't receive it. It's actually, you have some, I have some, we each receive some from the other. And through that, we create some, we create a sum that is greater than or a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts.
There was this student 3 years ago who was a freshman. She came to us with like a myriad of issues. Mom and dad weren't really in the picture, were kind of in the picture. But dad had an opportunity to use like tuition remission to help pay for tuition, was holding money back, and there was like a lot of issues. So like I helped her navigate that situation. And I got an email from her a couple weeks ago being like, because of you, I'm still here. And I think that's what, like, really meeting a student where they're at, because like I learned how to walk her through the financial process with financial aid and student accounts receivable. And we also like learned how to navigate the difficult relationship between her dad and her, and like how to kind of bridge that gap. You know, and obviously like every student situation is different, but that's like what I think we really mean by meet them where they're at, is like, you come in, you have these issues, how do we help you solve them? And then how do we help you succeed while you're here?
I actually think that in our community, that it's meeting all of us where we are. I think that's actually better than just saying meet students where they are. I think as a Lasallian community, we have to meet each other where our community is. And so that means everybody has to step up, everybody has to lean in, everybody has to learn from each other, everybody has to kind of, as a community, respect the Lasallian tradition, and then help all of us together create that path forward so that we can embrace and accept whatever is needed as we try and move forward as a campus. So, I always think, yes, we have to meet students where they're at, but I think we have to take it to a different level, because that is, everybody says that. Yeah, I meet students where they are. Well, we got to meet each other where we are, because some of our faculty, and I love them dearly, and I am an adjunct faculty, but we all are still evolving, right? Anybody that says that they're fully evolved has not fully evolved. Okay? Everybody should be continuously evolving. And so we need to evolve together as a community. And so to say we're going to go here to meet with the students or here where the faculty is, I'm more about that the community has to meet where the community is in order for all of us to move forward. So
I think that the commitment to the poor is strong, and at this point it's not just looking at the poor in resources. I think it's also looking for people who are poor in relationships, who there's so many different types of poverty, and the brothers really address all of those throughout their work and throughout their schools. I mean, there's some schools that they run that are, they're very expensive, they're very elite, but by educating those students to see poverty, to see different things, to see how and where change is possible, I think is really, really essential.
We are called to be agents of change. We are called to look at the values that underlie a Lasallian educational experience, a Lasallian Catholic educational experience, and to make sure that we become, leaven, yeast for the world, that we are able to advance the common good because of, in your case, because of the 4 years that you will have had immersed in a Lasallian experience. I think as Lasallians, we must keep focused on social justice, whatever that looks like.
I think that we are called, that we have a higher calling in terms of a vocation to work for equality and social justice in our communities. And I think, wow, right now in this time period in the United States, where the inequality that we are seeing, and the Black Lives Matter movement, really Black and Brown Lives Matter movement. I don't want to forget brown people, but I think we are and we should be playing a major role in that, because we have always been about equality and social justice, particularly in education, certainly in other kinds of things like healthcare and all. I mean, that is obviously that's how the Lasallians were founded, was being able to provide education to those who in any other instance would not be able to do that. So I really feel that we are, as Lasallians, even more needed in the world, and that we are really called to be part of the social movement that is happening right now. LaSalle has been very involved in voter registration, right? We have been a powerhouse and have been recognized every year nationally as this hub of voter registration for our students and our community. That's because we believe that everyone should have a voice.
We have to be creative in our solutions and be the people who are working against society in a way. Not all of society, because there are people who are fighting for these things, but be willing to take risks and be the people who are not always, standing up for what you believe in, even if it's not comfortable to do so. I think that's a lot of what we have to do.